Hi, I'm back for chapters 7 and 8. When we left off on chapter 6, Blackberries, Sal had a memory of a time that her dad and her mom had a little bit of tension between them. The mom felt like she wasn't necessarily good enough for the dad. And I'm sure everybody can relate to having a time like that where you feel like maybe you're not as good as someone else, or that you're not meeting someone else's standards, even if it's in your own head, which this seems to be. It seems like the dad is not the one putting the pressure on her. It's the mom herself who feels that she's maybe not good enough for the dad. So we're going to start with chapter 7, which is Illinois, which is just like a Gramps pronunciation of the state of Illinois. So remember, they're on their road trip from Ohio to Lewiston, Idaho. And so the scene starts back in the car with Graham and Gramps and Sal on the road trip. Okay. Well, looky here, Gramps shouted, the Illinois state line. He pronounced Illinois, exactly the way everyone in Bybanks, Kentucky pronounced it, and hearing that Illinois made me suddenly homesick for Bybanks. What happened to Indiana? Graham said. Why, you gooseberry, Gramps said. That's where we've been the past 3 hours, barreling through Indiana. You've been listening to the story of Peavy and plumb missed Indiana. Don't you remember Elkhart? We ate lunch in Elkhart. Don't you remember South Bend? You took a pee in South Bend. Why, you missed the entire Hoosier state, you gooseberry. He thought this was very funny. I forgot to tell you the page number. I'm at the top of page 34 now. Sorry. Just then the road curved. It actually curved. This was a shock. And off to the right was a huge jing-bang mass of water. It was as blue as the bluebells that grow behind the barn in Bybanks, and that water just went on and on. It was all you could see. It looked like a huge blue pasture of water. Are we at the ocean? Graham asked. We're not supposed to be passing the ocean, are we? You gooseberry, that's Lake Michigan. Gramps kissed his finger and put it against Graham's cheek. I sure would like to put my feet in that water, Graham said. Gramps swerved across 2 lanes of traffic and onto the exit ramp, and faster than you could milk a cow, we were standing barefoot in the cool water of Lake Michigan. The waves splashed up on our clothes, and the seagulls flew in circles overhead, calling in one great chorus as if they were glad to see us. Huzzah, huzzah, Graham said, wriggling her heels into the sand. Huzzah, huzzah. That huzzah, huzzah is just kind of a, I don't know, like a word of enjoyment or pleasure that Graham and Gramps kind of use throughout the book. We stopped that night on the outskirts of Chicago. I looked around at what I could see of Illinois from the Howard Johnson Motel, and it might as well have been 7,000 miles from the lake. It all looked precisely like northern Ohio to me, with its flat land and long, straight roads, and I thought what a very long journey this was going to be. With the dark came the whispers. Rush, hurry, rush. Remember, Sal feels that she's in a hurry to get there because she thinks if there's any chance to get her mom back, it will happen by, they have to get to Idaho by her mother's birthday. That night, I lay there trying to imagine Lewiston, Idaho, but my mind would not go forward to a place I had never been. Instead, I kept drifting back to Bybanks. Come here. Sorry. When my mother left for Lewiston, Idaho that April, my first thoughts were, how could she do that? How could she leave me? As the days went on, many things were harder and sadder, but some things were strangely easier. When my mother had been there, I was like a mirror. If she was happy, I was happy. If she was sad, I was sad. For the first few days after she left, I felt numb, non-feeling. I didn't know how to feel. I would find myself looking around for her to see what I might want to feel. One day, about 2 weeks after she left, I was standing against the fence watching a newborn calf wobble on its thin legs. It tripped and wobbled and swung its big head in my direction and gave me a sweet, loving look. Oh, I thought, I am happy at this moment in time. I was surprised that I knew this all by myself without my mother there. And that night in bed, I did not cry. I said to myself, Salamanca Tree Hiddle, you can be happy without her. It seemed a mean thought, and I was sorry for it, but it felt true. In the motel, as I was remembering these things, Gram came and sat on the edge of my bed. She said, do you miss your daddy? Do you want to call him? I did miss him, and I did want to call him, but I said, no, I'm fine, really. He might think I was a goose if I had to call him already. Okay then, Chickabiddy, Gram said, and when she leaned over to kiss me, I could smell the baby powder she always used. That smell made me feel sad, but I didn't know why. The next morning, when we got lost leaving Chicago, I prayed, please don't let us get in an accident. Please let us get there in time. Gramps said, at least it's a mighty fine day for a drive. When we finally found a road heading west, we took it. Our plan was to curve across the lower part of Wisconsin, veer into Minnesota, and then barrel straight on through Minnesota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, sweep up into Montana, and cross the Rocky Mountains into Idaho. Gramps figured it would take us about a day in each state. He didn't intend to stop too much until we reached South Dakota, and he was really looking forward to South Dakota. We're going to see the Badlands, he said. We're going to see the Black Hills. I didn't like the sound of either of those places, but I knew why we were going there. My mother had been there. The bus that she took to Lewiston stopped in all the tourist spots. We were following along in her footsteps. Okay, chapter 8 is called The Lunatic. By the way, there is a PowerPoint I put online that you need to read after this next chapter. And the PowerPoint kind of explains the path of the trip that Sal takes across the country, just to kind of help you visualize it. In case you've never been to those parts, it has some pictures of different areas that they visit so that you can kind of picture them in your head as we're reading. So your questions for this chunk of 7 and 8, some of them are from that PowerPoint, so you need to make sure that you look at the PowerPoint before you go online and answer the questions for this part. Okay? So chapter 8 is called The Lunatic, and it's on the starts on page 38. Once we were well on the road out of Illinois, Graham said, go on with Peavy. What happened next? Do you want to hear about the lunatic? Goodness, Graham said, as long as it's not too bloody. That Peavy is just like Gloria, I swear. A lunatic, imagine. Gramps said, did Gloria really have a hankering for me? Maybe she did, and maybe she didn't, Graham said. Well, gol dang, I was only asking. Seems to me, Graham said, you've got enough to worry about concentrating on these roads without worrying about Gloria. Gramps winked at me in the rearview mirror. I think our gooseberry is jealous, he said. I am not, Graham said. Tell about Peavy, Chickabiddy. I didn't want Graham and Gramps to get in a fight over Gloria, so I was happy to continue telling Phoebe's story. I was at Phoebe's one Saturday morning when Mary Lou Finney called me and invited us over to our house. Phoebe's parents were out, and Phoebe went all around the house checking to make sure that all the doors and windows were locked. Her mother had already done this, but she made Phoebe promise to do it as well. Just in case, Mrs. Winterbottom had said. I was not sure just in case of what. Maybe in case someone had snuck in and opened all the windows and doors in the 15 minutes between the time she left and the time we did. You can never be too careful, Mrs. Winterbottom had said. The doorbell rang. Phoebe and I looked out the window. Standing on the porch was a young man who looked about 17 or 18, although I am not as good at guessing people's ages as blind Mrs. Partridge is. The young man was wearing a black t-shirt and blue jeans, and his hands were stuffed into his pockets. He seemed nervous. My mother hates it when strangers come to the door, Phoebe said. She is convinced that any day one of them will burst into the house with a gun and turn out to be an escaped lunatic. Oh, honestly, Phoebe, I said, do you want me to answer the door? Phoebe took a deep breath. We'll do it together. She opened the door and said hello in a cool voice. Is this 49 Gray Street? The young man said. Yes, Phoebe said. So the Winterbottoms live here? After Phoebe admitted that, yes, it was the Winterbottom residence, she said, excuse me a moment, please, and she closed the door. Sal, do you detect any hints of lunacy? There doesn't appear to be any place he could be hiding a gun. His jeans are really tight. Maybe he has a knife tucked into his socks. Phoebe could be really dramatic. He isn't wearing any socks, I said. Phoebe opened the door again. The young man said, I want to see Mrs. Winterbottom. Is she here or what? Yes, Phoebe lied. The young man looked up and down the street. His hair was curly and mussed, and there were bright pink circles on his cheeks. Mussed just means like his hair was kind of messed up, messy. He wouldn't look us straight in the eye, but instead kept glancing to left and right. I want to talk to her, he said. She can't come to the door right now, Phoebe said. I thought he might actually cry when Phoebe said that. He chewed on his lip and blinked 3 or 4 times quickly. I'll wait, he said. Just a minute, Phoebe said, closing the door. She pretended to look for her mother. Mom, she called. Yoo-hoo! She went upstairs, thumping loudly on the steps. Mother! Phoebe and I returned to the door. He was still standing there with his hands in his pockets, staring mournfully at Phoebe's house. Mournfully means like kind of sad, sadly. That's strange, Phoebe said to him. I thought she was here, but she must have gone out. There's a whole lot of other people here, though, she added quickly. Scads and scads of people, but no Mrs. Winterbottom. Is Mrs. Winterbottom your mother? He asked. Yes, Phoebe said. Would you like me to leave a message? The little pink circles on his cheeks became even pinker. No, he said. No, I don't think so, no. He looked up and down the street and then up at the number above the door. What's your name? Phoebe. He repeated her name, Phoebe Winterbottom. I thought he was going to make a joke about her name, but he didn't. He glanced at me. Are you a Winterbottom too? He asked. No, I said. I'm a visitor. And then he left. He just turned around, walked slowly down the porch steps and on down the street. We waited until he turned the corner before we left. We ran all the way to Mary Lou's. Phoebe was certain that the young man was going to ambush us. Honestly, like I said, she has a vivid imagination. Okay, I'm going to pause there. That's the end of chapter 8. So I want you guys to think about who the young man might be. Why is he looking for Mrs. Winterbottom? And then we're going to pick up next time with chapters 9 and 10. Bye.